All right, welcome to Cracking Conflict, a 15-episode series on the Fearlessly Human podcast. This series is all about the friction we face at work, those tense meetings, unresolved tensions, and the conversations we can't stop replaying. Together, we'll explore what really drives conflict and how to meet it with more skill, clarity, and humanity.
In each episode, we unpack the psychology, power dynamics, and emotions behind workplace conflict. Whether you are leading a team or you just want better relationships at work, this series is for you. I'm Dr. Vicki Dalton, a clinical and forensic psychologist tuning in from Indianapolis in the US of A. I have spent decades now helping couples, leaders, and people in general navigate conflict everywhere from the courtroom to the boardroom. I also train individuals, families, and others on how to recognize, manage, and resolve conflict, because it's really not a question of if, but when.
And I'm Kavita Khanna, a leadership and culture strategist coming to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I've spent years helping leaders and organizations shift how they lead, relate, and evolve. Because conflict doesn't have to be a crisis. It can be a catalyst for insight, for growth and change. And the truth is, we don't get to skip conflict, but we can get better at it. So let's get curious about conflict and become fearless about being human.
All right, so we've been having some fun discussions here, and our previous podcast sort of talked about what goes on, why we fear conflict. You know, why do we have this negative connotation about it? What happens in organizations, at the workplace, in our own mind, in our relationships? And we kind of settled on the idea. So we really need to be thinking about, how do we normalize conflict? And we started talking a little bit more about the idea that conflict doesn't always have to have this sort of negative approach. So with that shift, I kind of want to ask you, why does sort of this discomfort between people, it oftentimes can lead to some really great things if we actually let it. Do you want to speak to that a little bit more?
Again, looking back at what businesses have told their people, this is the business strategy, this is the business value. We want alignment. That's what we go for. Everyone needs to pull in the same direction. So that's one thing to think about. Second thing is, when you look at all the literature around teamwork, there's a huge stress, again, on alignment and on harmony. And nowhere do they talk about, yes, we talk about conflict, but in the context of resolution. So as though conflict is a bad thing and you need to cure it. Nowhere do we talk about, actually, it's a good thing, let's have more of it.
Great.
And it's going to feel uncomfortable, but that's okay. We never do that. Why do you think that is?
I was going to say, I can't think of a time in my training, right up until maybe when I was doing, training to be like a marriage counselor, because you're going to have conflict then. But right up to that point, all of psychology, it was all about resolving conflict, not about kind of stirring the pot, so to speak. And yet, I guess I think about, that's the whole concept of think tanks, is people come together with different ideas. If we all came together with the same ideas, we don't come up with new ideas, right? Or the idea of pressure testing ideas. Here's the idea, what we're thinking about. Here's where we're going. Now let's poke holes in it. Let's find out where there are problems. And that helps us shore it up to make it a stronger and better idea. But by definition, it's conflict. And when someone's so wedded to their idea that they're uncomfortable with somebody poking holes in it, it just doesn't happen. So we don't have that conflict.
Is this something about really to do with our brains? I mean, is it to do with the fact that conflict is uncomfortable and our brains can't? Is it something like that? What do you know?
I think it can be. I think about when we're in strong emotional places, it's pretty hard to problem solve. Creativity screeches to almost a halt when we're into big emotional states. So if you're thinking of conflict as these big blow-ups and angry and taking it personal and really hurtful things, then that's not going to be creative. That's not going to be helpful. Your brain doesn't work that way. But thinking of it as, we can disagree and keep talking. We can, let me hear your perspective, not just to be listening to where there's a problem that I can jump on, but to really be listening to understand, because it's different from my perspective. That's where creativity can still flow. But if we're in a place where we're thinking about you're wrong and I'm going to prove you wrong, or I'm worried you're going to prove me wrong, then it becomes about some kind of a competitive place. And yet, the teams that work together often do things differently. There's actually quite a bit of research that shows some of the best outcomes. As a matter of fact, there was something that was published by Lilly in the Harvard Business Review several years ago that talked about this, that they actually found that when they're having some conflicts with their partners, having some rubs, when things aren't perfectly aligned in their alliances, that's actually when they get the best outcomes in terms of product launches and profitability. So disagreements and rubs can lead to better ideas and innovation. What is that phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention. When we have a need, we would create. And in order to recognize that you have a need, you have to be in the right kind of headspace. But there are a lot of things that interfere with that, things that you'll hear me talk about other times, like those cognitive distortions in those pieces, where you start thinking erroneously about things, and then you can't problem solve.
Yeah, the other thing I find is that we're talking a lot about it's such an uncertain world, and that people don't know how to deal with the technological exponential growth of technology. All of that in some ways manifests itself as conflicts in our brains. I think all the fogging that happens and all this uncertainty is really a manifestation of something's changed. It is fearful. I don't know how to deal with it. It feels conflicting. I need to fend it off. Whereas if we say, "Oh, welcome change," we'll see what's there, what gifts you've got hidden. But I think there's a switch, isn't there? Like you almost need to do something with your brain.
It's mentally. So to me, it's a mindset of, okay, it's what I would refer to as sort of my confidence or self-efficacy. I can handle you disagreeing with me. Let's keep talking. Let me hear where you're going. Let me be open. That sort of stay curious kind of thing that can happen. But the more confident the person, oftentimes the more senior the person, maybe in a position, the longer they've been there, they seem to be able to tolerate conflict better. And I think it's because they have more of a sense of navigating that uncertainty. They've done it longer, done it more. But I do think people can learn to do it better and faster. And part of it is not being afraid of disagreeing, not being afraid of speaking up if you disagree. Just do so respectfully. I guess I got to put that little caveat in there. You got to be respectful, in how you share it. But it's out of disagreement that I feel like change happens, growth happens.
Yeah. Now, I'll have to respectfully disagree, because what I have found is, in terms of your previous comment about experience probably makes you comfortable with change and with conflict. The problems generally tend to be nothing to do with experience, more to do with and I hate saying this, but what the person's baggage has been. If they have come from something that has scarred them because they had a conflict and they didn't know how to get through it, that becomes like you almost say, oh, that's a trigger for that person. You can figure it out, and the more experienced you are,
I can walk where you're going. I can follow you on that path. That, I guess, what I was envisioning when I talked about the more experience somebody has, I guess I'm envisioning people that are pretty comfortable in their role, have been watching things kind of roll out. They don't get as caught up with uncertainty, because if they feel confident in their ability to navigate. What you're talking about is somebody who may not feel as confident in their ability to navigate because of some trauma, some difficulties that had. And I had an interesting discussion not that long ago with a really great professor who talked about this idea that actually I don't think people have a problem with change. They have a problem with being told they have to change.
Yeah.
And so that feels like conflict that is being pushed upon me versus, hey,
they have to change.
They have to change, being told. That's conflict versus, tell me a little bit more. Yeah. I want people to stay curious. Tell me a little bit more about why you feel that way. Walk me through how you came to that conclusion. So that's some of the tools and the tips that we try to teach people on how to not be so afraid of conflict, how to be able to stay in the here and now and not go into spinning in imagination or our history or traumas, and to stay in the moment so that you can problem solve and stay creative. That's where we can disagree.
Yeah, and that's precisely what we're going to cover in our third episode. So if
Oh.
you're interested in what's going to happen, stay tuned.
All right. See you guys soon.